Hey, can you hear me now? Guys, ooh, a little bit of feedback on that. Yeah, I accidentally had it muted. Let me just reiterate what I was saying a little bit beforehand. Your close reading paper is going to be due a week from today, and it's going to be 5 pages long, MLA. That just means Times New Roman, 12-point font, the MLA Convention of Citations, which you can find at the Purdue OWL website. I just think it's better to download a template that makes life so much easier. But it's going to answer the question of whether or not you think that we are more equipped today to accept the monster from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein than we were in 1816. And you're going to use sources from the news if you would like, but I would also insist that you use a lot of the text that quotes from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein figure heavily in your answer to that question. There will be an assignment sheet available on our Canvas page after class. Also, hey guys, turn on your cameras if you can. I have my camera on today. I was just saying to everybody else that I had intentionally underprepared as I put together this class because I know that you guys are going to have a lot to say about the final act of Frankenstein. And I would like for you guys to do most of the talking today if we can swing that. So, thoughts on the ending. Cameron's got his hand up. Extremely disappointed. Okay, cool. 2 parts to my question. Why are you disappointed? What did you want instead?
Between two monsters, between, what was it, Adam Frankenstein, who is the figurative and I guess physical monster, whereas you have Victor Frankenstein, who's more the emotional monster sort.
Ah, okay. Victor Frankenstein is the emotional monster. I like that. But do you think that would have, we kind of do get that fight in chapter 10 in Mont Blanc, right? And Victor, I mean, he's probably the average height of men in this time period, 5 foot few inches. And the monster is 8 feet, rippling with muscle. How do you think that fight, how did you want that fight to go? Guns or what?
It's a physical brawl and the monster obviously wins, but I was hoping that there would be some, Victor created a rational thinking monster. So I was hoping for at least some sort of a play of like reason or smartness trying to outmaneuver the other one.
Yeah.
It's actually this kind of like, maybe not transcending humanity, but in a way it's like, it's a continuation of humanity in a sense where this is not a thinking beast. This is actually like a man in a way.
Okay, yeah. So a conflict, sort of, kind of like the Marvel movie ending, right? With lots of special effects and clobbering. All right, okay. I think that would have been more exciting, for sure. How did everybody else feel? How are we feeling, Georgia? You disappointed like Cameron is?
Don't think that the monster would have been so sad about Victor dying if it
that the monster wouldn't be so sad about Victor dying. So if you were in the monster's place, you would just move on with your life. The monster is strangely tied. I don't know, strangely, the Victor is only tied to the real world. He's tied to Victor. And after Victor dies, what does the monster say he's going to do? Anna, what? Commit suicide, right? Let's go look at that passage, right? It's an extremely, big R romantic passage here. I'm just going to drop the Gutenberg link in the chat so that you guys can see it. There it is. The monster says, but soon I shall ascend my funeral pile triumphantly and exult in the agony of the torturing flames. The light of that conflagration will fade away. My ashes will be swept into the sea by the winds. My spirit will sleep in peace. Or if it thinks, it will not surely think thus. Farewell. So he obviously wants peace, right? And thinks that suicide is the only way to gain it. Is there another option? Do you just see it? Yeah, I can't.
And this is the other part of my, even though it doesn't end with like any sort of closure between monster, Adam, and Victor.
Yeah.
I also wanted, instead of choosing suicide, I wanted the monster to choose redemption, try and find something living for it. Not necessarily that, but I wanted him to try and like find a way to try to redeem himself.
Okay.
Even when he's doing this, that it was wrong on some level.
Yeah.
I don't want to choose to just walk away from what he's done. I want him to try and
Fix it. And the way this is him fixing it, this is him killing the murderer. You're like, yeah. But you bring up an interesting point, which I like, and it's that the monster knows it's responsible at some level for the misery and suffering that has occurred in the story. Let me see here. Let me see if I can find that passage. But it is true, he says, that I am a wretch. I have murdered the lovely and the helpless. I have strangled the innocent as they slept and grasped to death his throat, who never injured me or any living thing. I have devoted my creator, the select specimen of all that is worthy of love and admiration among men, to misery. So he's internalizing a lot of the blame for what happens in the novel, right? So he's like, it's me. I'm the one at fault. Do you agree with this take? Is he the murderer? Yes. He's not the product of Victor's cruelty.
Still chose anything else. He chose
Interesting, yeah. Yeah.
Blame him for trying to escape it.
You did. Yeah, Justine is particularly one of the worst examples, I think, of his most monstrous moment.
I think it's possible for them to both be villains.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Because like our whole sympathy towards monsters, that he's a rational creature who understands that he's alone. But at the same, like, side of that coin is because he's a rational creature who understands that he's doing.
Which is, it's like part of the horror
Yeah,
of the
he's
novel.
the one in this story who knows best that evil produces evil, and he's just playing right into what he knows.
In this way, I think he's a lot more rational than even Victor, right? Because at the end, Victor says, "I did nothing wrong," which is a really interesting. It was a really interesting passage. It's like he's on the ship and he gets time to think, right? He says, during these last days, I have been occupied in examining my past conduct, nor do I find it blamable. Right? I did nothing wrong. I didn't kill anybody. The monster is the killer. I'm just living my life. I've done no violence at all. Cameron.
Well, I mean, he's right, he hasn't killed him, but he's still self-master.
Okay. Do you feel like there's a middle ground to be found between the monster's position and Victor's position of blamability, Madeline? Are you going to say yes, yes, no, no? These two guys are talking about where they stand ethically, right?
I mean, I think part of it is the monsters like if Victor had shown the monster like not necessarily like love, but like any sort of like
Anything really.
yeah, would he have turned out the way he did, and like he would have taught the monster, I guess, right from wrong. But at the same time, I don't know if Frankenstein necessarily knows right from wrong, given that he did create the monster. So
Yeah, I always find this passage extraordinarily shocking. Like, I did nothing wrong, right? You know, and Cameron's making a good point, is that there are sins of omission and sins of commission, and Victor hasn't done a whole lot in the way of commission other than make the monster. But yeah, this is a really interesting passage. During these last days, I've been occupied in blaming my past conduct. No, in examining my past conduct, nor do I find it blamable. In a fit of enthusiastic madness, he's just saying I was a little enthusiastic, okay? Just was feeling it. I freaking love science, right? I was just getting into my inner Neil deGrasse Tyson, okay? And I created a rational creature and was bound towards him to assure, as far was in my power, his happiness and well-being. This was my duty, but there was another still paramount to that. My duties toward the beings of my own species had greater claims to my attention because they included a greater portion of happiness or misery. Okay, so this is utilitarian ethics, right? My claim towards humanity is greater than, my obligations towards humanity is greater than my obligations toward the creature, simply because there are more humans than there are creatures who I have made. Rebecca's making a good face. Okay, or for everyone on Zoom, Rebecca said that all the humans here can take care of themselves for all their numbers. They can manage it. The creature, not so much. And so Victor actually has a greater share of responsibility for the creature. Right, you have a kid, you got to take care of your kid. Yeah, more than somebody else's kid. But Victor is introducing a statement here where, like, I'm all right, I'm perfectly justified in not taking care of my kid, because to do so would be to endanger every other child that ever existed.
I have a question.
Hey, we got a question coming in over Zoom. Rebecca, we'll get back to that. Yeah, fire.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But so does the monster know right from wrong without Victor? Like, no, right?
Yeah, he learns right from wrong without Victor. You know, the whole bit where he's at the Lacey cottage and he sees the way a family should look and feels himself so painfully excluded from that. You know, also he reads Volney's book about the Roman Empire. He reads Goethe's book about, young Werther, The Sorrows of Paradise Lost. So he's, despite being only a few years old, he's quite ethically advanced, even to the point where at the end here, without Victor's help, he's taking responsibility for all the misery of the novel. So yeah, he does know.
So you know how he says that whole fallen angel part? Like, would he be considering Victor as God type thing? And then
You're breaking up. Can you reword that?
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, I was saying, so the fallen angel part, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh wait, I can't hear you.
Yeah, the fallen angel bit where he talks about how he is like Satan in Milton's Paradise Lost.
Yeah, so would Victor be his God in his eyes? Because then he would have that responsibility of like right from wrong, right?
Right. But then But Milton does complicate things because Satan in Paradise Lost, book 1 and 2, right? You know, the first two major poems, Satan asks a really important question, which is, what do I do now that I'm damned? Can I do any more wrong now that it's not hell, right? It's pandemonium. He's just cast down into this flaming sea, and he's miserable, and all of his friends are miserable. And the question is, now that you are damned, are you still beholden to human morality or the laws of God? Like, let's say that, you know, you're a bad person, Audrey. You go to hell. Oh no, we're assuming hell's a real place, right? And you get down there, right? You know, sulfur, lava, heavy metal music, right? And you are still a moral being in hell, right? Still move around, you still talk, you know, you can still shortchange the barista, right? Are you still beholden to moral laws when you're down there? Should, yeah. Yeah, well, should you open the door for people in hell?
When you're down there and be like, I'm not gonna, you know, like give in to all this, or you could just go literally crazy and do terrible things because you're already down there anyway. So you're like, well, might as well.
Right. And that's good. And that's what Satan says in Paradise Lost, evil be thou my good, right? I have no reason now to be a good angel, right? I'll just do whatever I want. Frankenstein's monster thinks he's in a similar situation. Is he in a similar situation as Satan in books 1 and 2 of Paradise Lost? Hannah's nodding. He's in a similar situation, right? Why would he do good?
I think that, well, I do think that he's in a similar situation. He's already seen as a bad person, or like a bad thing, not even a person. So like, why would he? But I think that he would have to make the choice himself to do good for himself.
For himself. This localizes morality onto the subject, right? He's not beholden to society. He's not beholden to God. He's not beholden to his creator. He's simply beholden to himself. Interesting. So why then does he do what makes himself miserable? Why is he making himself miserable if he can do whatever he wants?
I think that sometimes whenever you're seen as a bad person, or whenever you're seen as a specific type of thing, you start telling yourself that you're like that. And like, he was just made, and he was made selfishly, but like, he wasn't made to be bad. So just because he was portrayed that way his whole life, like that's how he sees himself, and that's how he's just gonna act.
Right. He isn't as cut off as Satan is, right? Satan's sent down to pandemonium. He's like, you know, gone to hell. He's gone forever. Not so with the monster. Like, he does say that he wants to go to Brazil, and just live there, but he doesn't do that. And what's so interesting about Satan is that he doesn't actually accept his own exile in Paradise Lost. He goes and he seeks out Eden. And then, you know, that's when he stops really being as cool of a character as he is in the very beginning, because he knows he can just walk away and go do his own thing and live his own life. But he chooses to mess with Adam and Eve. And that's this really great moment in Paradise Lost, where he realizes he's not as independent as he thought he was, that hate still has all these hooks in him, and he's just going to keep committing acts of violence and misery. And Audrey, you had raised your hand.
I feel like Frankenstein's, you know, situation is kind of similar of just relating it to like every like comic villain origin story, like every like Marvel DC movie. It's like
Yeah.
someone wronged them, something bad happened to them when they were a kid or whenever, and it's so much easier for them to just become a terrible person and inflict that pain on everyone else because they're in so much pain, but they don't know how to like deal with the pain. So then they just become this evil person who's like, I'm just gonna stay evil and like I don't have to, like I don't care about if I'm following the rules or not. Then they go do all these terrible things because they're not getting that love and respect and the things that they desire from the people that wrong them. So
Yeah.
just gonna lash out and be a terrible person.
It's massively sympathetic too, right? Like I'm with you there. I'm sorry, but the question remains. I think Audrey is cool, right? Yeah, that makes them a kind of an anti-hero or a sympathetic hero, and a villain at the same time. If that's the case, how do we make sense of Victor as a villain? Where's his trauma that caused him to do this thing?
Like every time the monster, like did it start before he made the monster or is it like now that he made the monster every time because of those kind of he's like in this huge suffering
Yeah.
for months
Yeah, it's a cycle, right?
terrible, like, and so then he's like even less likely to help the monster. He's like,
Right.
you just kill this person and this person.
True, that's the cycle, but I think we can all agree that the most monstrous thing that Victor does is create and abandon the monster. So your model of trauma creating villains is good. I like it. I mean, that's obviously what's going on here with the monster. What trauma, Rebecca, do you have an answer for this? Can I get to that after I get this question? Yes, you would raise your hand.
I was just thinking that I don't particularly think he became a villain. I don't think he was all evil and whatever because
The monster or Victor?
the monster. Because I think if he had been, he would have been killing everyone just on sight because he can. He's a villain.
Yeah, he only kills a few people, right?
It's supposed to get back at Victor. Like all this whole thing is just revenge. And once he was done with that, he was done killing humans. I don't think it was a villainous act. I think it was animal in pain act.
Yeah, he does actually contemplate for a moment going amongst humanity and wreaking his vengeance, right? He says killing as many of them as he can before they kill him. And that is some truly monstrous behavior. Like he did it. And I mean, if you imagine what he could do with his monstrous intelligence and his monstrous body, if he just went to Paris and started just stacking bodies like cordwood, he could go for quite a long time before they eventually got him. He doesn't do that. It's spite, right? It's spite. So yeah, I mean, yes, he's not a mindless monster. I absolutely, you're 100% correct. I think we're going back a little bit. We were asking what trauma might have inspired Victor to do what many consider the most villainous act in the novel. You had a point about that, right?
The beginning of the novel, Victor's mother.
Yeah. She dies. He's an adult, right?
Really, like dealt with that trauma. So maybe underlying is he is wishing that he could have his mother back. So
seems rather disproportionate. It's a good point. It seems like the most traumatic thing. I mean, maybe his professors are mean to him, right? I'm seeing hands. I think Paul's Hannah's hand, but let me go and talk to the Zoom people for a hot minute because I'm seeing text appear. And Sia says, plus it's easier when you blame someone else. And he was blaming Victor, so it kind of justified what he did. It's interesting to see it, and that's true. And I think it's interesting that the monster actually shows lots of character development in the end by blaming himself, which makes him incredibly sympathetic, or even more sympathetic than he was. Joshua DeLuca says, I think the monster sort of has a temper tantrum moment. Yes. Like father, like son. And tries to get Victor to notice him like a little kid who wants attention, but does so with adult strength. Like he does not really understand what he was doing exactly, or more so the extent of his actions, maybe. Yeah, I would say that with the death of William, because we don't get him saying, I will kill William. He just squeezes him, he dies, and then the monster says, I too can create destruction. He's almost surprised that it worked. However, Joshua, I think by the time we get to Elizabeth, which is one of the most sad moments in the book, he knows exactly what he's doing, right? It's not just a temper tantrum anymore. It's premeditated murder. Paul.
I would argue that the trauma creating evil argument works, but Victor's evil was a different type of evil. It was more of the narcissistic, what if I can't create evil and what if nothing I do is wrong? And so there's the evil of, oh, I know I'm doing evil and I'm lashing out, but there's also the evil of this isn't wrong, I'm just doing it. And so I think they both work as almost two independent actions.
Okay. Not all evil is the same kind of evil, right? That's definitely a claim that the novel is making. There are different varieties of bad. Hannah, you had raised your hand. You had a point to make.
You said that maybe his mom dying is disproportionate, but maybe it's not, because maybe maybe he was making the monster like not out of trauma, but just because he wanted to find somebody to love him like the way that his mom did or didn't.
Yeah, that's the line when he gives those reasons. He says, I want a creature that will worship me as a god, right? Which is an interesting point. Like, did his mother worship him as a god? Is he used to like her being like, you're such a great smart boy, so handsome? Alahim has a point that he wants to make. What's your point, Alahim?
I think he just wanted glory for his own name.
Right. And one of the things that I think backs you up there is that he doesn't share his scientific breakthroughs with the world. He does it for himself. And then when the monster is created, he abandons it, right? So if it really was about scientific progress, then cool. There's actually some benefit to that. But you're right. He runs away, doesn't share he doesn't share his papers with everybody, right? It's kind of like the idea of like, what can humans do? He's sort of glorying in the idea that humans can accomplish anything, do anything, that the spirit of man is indomitable. And he's not the only character in the novel who does that, by the way. He wants to discover a new world beyond the ice in the North Pole, right? And in many ways, he feels like he's a bad dude because while he's up there, people are dying, right? And he has a really interesting moment of reflection. Right? He says, yet, let me see if I can pull this up here. Yet it is terrible to reflect that the lives of all these men are endangered through me. If we are lost, my mad schemes are the cause. So the question of who's responsible here, Victor or the monster, isn't terribly science fiction, because Walton's scenario shows us how everyone can find themselves in a situation similar to the one of Victor and the monster, right? He's on a ship that's in the North Pole. He's looking for the Northwest Passage, or he says a new country up there. And is he just as guilty of the suffering the crew experiences as Victor is guilty of the suffering that the monster experiences? I think these people are dying, right? Yes.
Yes, he's just as guilty, but he has the opportunity to turn around, and he has the warnings not just from Victor's stories about ambition, but also from the crew saying, hey, we are suffering. So they have very parallel situations but Walton just had one extra opportunity to turn around.
Yeah, and does turn around, which I think makes the novel in many ways a happy story. Right, you know, the whole idea of going to a tragedy, right? Aristotle says in his Poetics, is so that you can walk away from it. He calls this catharsis. Right, you go to a play in ancient Athens. It's, you know, Agamemnon, and you see lots of misery taking place. You know, actually, I think the place called Clytemnestra. No, yes, yeah, no. I forget, but lots of death, lots of murder. And you walk away from Oedipus Rex and you say to yourself, wow, I'm sure glad that's not me. And it allows you to have a feeling of release, right? And you now have seen the mistakes that they've made and you can do better. I had one of your guys' journals about Sense and Sensibility. And you were talking about the character of Margaret, who is the younger sister in the Dashwood family. And one of the great ideas, I forget which one of you wrote this, but one of the great ideas is that she's a stand-in for the reader. She's just there observing, watching the whole entire plot unfold, and can now use Marianne and Eleanor as models of what to do and what not to do as she pursues her own courtship, which happens immediately after the novel ends. And so I think that's actually a really great way to think of Walton, because he's in a lot of ways, he's the stand-in for the audience. I think who was saying that there are fourth wall breaks in their journal? Was that you, Renee? You were saying, man, this feels like Deadpool, because Victor says, oh, I see you smiling, right? And it's because you forgot for a hot minute that he was telling his story to Walton. Still, you're not wrong, because Walton's kind of like you. In his role as audience member, he's sitting in the same seat that you are. And so when he decides to turn around and go home and not pursue glory, it's treated as a good thing. In my other class, I had a student who wants to be a combat pilot, wants to fly helicopters for the United States Army. And also he's got a good job set up where he could fly helicopters here in Texas. And it would be great. And he's struggling with which job he should take. And then he got to that bit where Victor says this, right? You know, this is the reason Victor's talking to Walton. He says, a human being in perfection ought always to preserve a calm and peaceful mind, and never to allow passion or a transitory desire to disturb his tranquility. I do not think that the pursuit of knowledge is an exception to this rule. If the study to which you apply yourself has a tendency to weaken your affections and to destroy your taste for those simple pleasures in which no alloy can possibly mix, then that study is certainly unlawful. Interesting, you know, Victor with his God complex is saying what's lawful, what isn't lawful, right? But I think he's got a really good point here. Right? These sort of things are not befitting the human mind. If this rule were always observed, if no man allowed any pursuit whatsoever to interfere with the tranquility of his domestic affections, like, you know, taking care of his family, just being a good dude, you know, donating to the local animal shelter, right? Greece had not been enslaved. This is Greece being enslaved by the Ottoman Empire. Caesar would have spared his country. America would have been discovered more gradually, and you know the conquistadors wouldn't have killed everybody in South America, right? You know, the empires of Mexico and Peru had not been destroyed. And he's like, and my student is like, I don't think I should be a combat pilot in a helicopter, right? You feeling about this? What are you thinking?
See where they're getting at with the unbridled ambition is problem, but without ambition at all, we never get the plane, we never get the car. we never get the phone. We never we don't stop becoming hunter gatherers. There's nothing in this world that is not accomplished without ambition, without going out into that unknown.
Okay, yeah. Some big questions. Are we better off now than we were when we were hunter gatherers? I mean, the hunter gatherers didn't put 6 million people in gas chambers, right? Over the course of a few years. So, man, I got hands coming up. We're gonna get Lauren, then we're gonna come over to you, Cameron. What you have a thing to say?
Ooh, I was gonna start by saying because we perceive Victor to kind of be a villain.
I mean, you and I don't know about everybody else in this room.
I'm so upset.
No, it's upsetting. This is an extraordinarily upsetting novel. There's that, you remember when Clarval asks Victor, he says, "Are we always to be miserable, my dear Victor?" And the answer is yes.
No, what I was gonna say is how Adam was saying that he wished that his only feelings were thirst, hunger, and heat because he hated the feeling of yeah. So back to the hunter gatherers thing, the more simpler life might be less emotionally damaging, but you also wouldn't have the emotional highs.
Right. Okay, yeah. I got another. No, you exactly right. Who knows? Another hand up here from Cameron.
Yeah, so you had mentioned how, or you had asked how if we are better off now than when we were hunter-gatherers in regards to about people with Frankenstein. Those same hunter-gatherers would have left Frankenstein as a child up on a mountain to die.
Yeah, probably because they couldn't take care of him. That's debatable. There's this really great passage from gosh, I forget the name of the author. Happens in your old age, but that human history begins in the hunter-gatherer age because that's when we start seeing people taking care of each other, bones that have been mended. Right? They're just as human back then as we are now. They love the people they love. They hate the people they hate. Right? But yeah, it was very common in developing cultures to abandon children who were not thought viable. Right? You just stick them out there. And there's actually that little bit in Songs of Innocence and Experience about child sacrifice. Absolutely brutal. But the point that Blake is making there is that we're still doing it today. Right? Paul.
I think that it ignores the idea behind the novel that science is amoral. It doesn't, the advancement of technology does not make us better or worse people. We are just people. The science behind it is amoral. But the idea is that science can be applied in a moral way. And without that science, without that science that can be applied in a moral way, those ways to apply it morally never exist. So I think it presents a darker side to ambition, but if you only see the darker side to ambition, you never discover DNA, you never discover the medicines. There are moral sides to science.
Okay, yeah. I think we might be slightly straw manning Victor's position here because he's not saying don't do science. He's not saying don't explore the North Pole. He's saying don't do so in a fit of misery. Don't do so in a state of agitation. Don't do so like he was when he was making the monster. It's all sweating and huffing and puffing and bending over the table and sawing and sewing, right? To do so in a state of tranquility, right? And you should never allow passion or transitory desire to disturb your tranquility. So yeah, do science. Yeah, go to the North Pole. Sure, make another human being from the scraps of other human beings in a garret somewhere in, no man's land, urban jungle. Sure, do it, but do it chill. Do it when you're kicking back and you're not having a hard time with it. Just go about it nice and easy. Hang loose. Renee, you're laughing. Yeah, are you down with this? There's no bad science. It's just the way you do science. Passion equals progress. Well, not here, right? Interesting. Interesting. You know, I'm reminded of St. Paul, who in 1 Thessalonians 4 says, make it your ambition to live a quiet life, to do your own business, and to work with your hands, right? Just a very simple, command to early Christians. And then Constantine sees this cross in the sky. He's like, by this sign you will conquer. I'm going to kill everybody, right? They're very different vibes that are being put forward. And Rebecca raised her hand.
I think it can be hard to pursue tranquility. Sometimes it's easier to just allow your passion to take over, but it's more about being rational. That's not necessarily comfort.
Wow, what a lot. I mean, she is her mother's daughter, right? Extremely Wollstonecraft, like privileging rationality.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. But also, the line here is right. She talks about domesticism. Oh man, he talks about domesticism. I'm actually doing what I'm not supposed to be doing and saying that this is something that Mary Shelley would say, which debatable. Yes, well, where's the line where he says that it's domestic here? Yeah, if this were a rule, always observed, no man allowed any pursuit whatsoever to interfere with the tranquility of his domestic affections, imperialism wouldn't have happened. So I think, Rebecca, you're right. It's rationality, but rationality always has rules, right? And so you've taken your passion too far when your passion voids the tranquility of domestic affections, when you can't be a good dad anymore, when you can't be a good brother anymore, when you can't be a good son anymore, you've went and done it. You've gone too far. But I did in a topic of conversation that we inched away from, but I want to get back to, which is the amorality of science. What's the title of this book? There we go. I'm just going to scroll all the way up here to show you guys, right? Of course, that's what it is. But Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. Y'all want to help me out with the reference that's being made here? All right, yeah.
Is that the Titan who gave fire to humanity, or am I thinking wrong?
You're right on the money. Okay, so Zeus overthrows the Titans, who are the deities that preside over creation prior to the rise of Mount Olympus, right? But having help, one of the people or Titans who helps Zeus is a Titan named Prometheus, and he is motivated by the savage injustice of the Titans' reign. He thinks they're bad guys, and he wants to undermine them, sees Zeus as a possible way to get back at the tyranny of the heavens. And so he does so, and Zeus allows him to retain his power and position. However, Prometheus then finds that Olympus is unjust, that they're cruel to man, that mankind is enslaved. And so to try to balance the scales, brings fire to men. All right, just takes them this secret technology from the gods that allows them to, have warmth in the winter, to cook their food, have light in the darkness. It's great. And for this, Zeus punishes him by chaining him to the side of a mountain where an eagle comes every day and picks out his liver, and he screams and he yells. It's just absolutely miserable. I think Laura was talking about, this is a really miserable book. Yeah, with Greek mythology, just as miserable. His liver grows back, and then the next day the eagle comes again and eats it. Oh my gosh, does this relate to Frankenstein at all? Who's the modern Prometheus? What's the modern Prometheus? How do you reconcile this story with the novel you just read? Laura. Yeah, keep talking, actually.
There's the modern Prometheus.
Victor is the modern Prometheus because he's
Giving life to something else. But that would also put him up as a position to be like a god, and I dislike that.
I like how we're hating on Victor. This is the Victor hate corner. Thank you.
And so then he is punished for what he's done, which
Yeah.
Adam's punish.
I like how you insist on calling the monster Adam. Hey, that's his chosen name. I should have been your Adam, right?
I like made that note in my head. I was like, I can't call him the monster. It hurts me.
Hurts me too. I like to call him Adam. That's good. That's good. You're not wrong.
Yeah, well, he gets punished for giving something to the humans, or Victor gets punished for giving life to Adam. But I just don't know. Like, that's how I see it fit, but I don't know if I like it.
You don't know if you like it. Why don't you keep working on that? Why don't you keep working on it? Someone else had raised their hand to make. Cameron, did you have an idea? Did you have a thought? You don't like Victor as Prometheus.
He delivers fire and sort of technology to create life, but he winds up getting punished for it. But that's the difference, though, is that there's no external force that's really punishing him per se, or at least I don't want to characterize that. It's more of,
I mean the monster, right?
his failure to be a good parent or teacher to Adam would have really solved all this from the beginning. If he just
Right.
been nice to him, none of the tragedies would have ensued.
Okay, yeah. So I'm getting to this feeling that you guys don't like Victor as Prometheus, or you see problems with that, or you say that the modern Prometheus would therefore be different than the classical Prometheus. Is there a possibility that we're going to hold on to that for a second? Is there a possibility that the monster is the modern Prometheus? Hit me with it. Zeus cast him down. Zeus threw him out. Yes. Yeah. It's a really great scene, if you remember it, where the monster discovers fire. Do you remember that? Yeah, he sticks his hand into the coals, right? And he discovers that it can really hurt you. And then he also employs fire in the burning down of the DeLacy cottage. And he dances around the flames like a joyous savage, right? So that's one. Yeah, sure. I like that. But fire imagery is associated with the monster. But what's really interesting is that Mary Shelley's husband, she wasn't married to him in 1816. They were just boyfriend, girlfriend traveling Europe. Percy Bysshe Shelley, before they met, wrote a poem called Prometheus Unbound. And it was a kind of sequel to Paradise Lost, where Prometheus breaks his chains, climbs back up on top of Olympus, beats up Zeus, becomes the new god of the world, and everyone's like an atheist vegetarian who believes in free love. It's an awesome poem, and I wish we could read it because I know you guys would be equal parts delighted and offended and charmed and really interested. But yeah, so Percy Bysshe Shelley has normalized associating Prometheus with Satan, right? And the monster goes ahead and says so many times that he's a lot like Milton's Satan. So when I see the title Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus, I'm reminded of Sense and Sensibility, because it's not sense or sensibility, it's sense and sensibility, speaking to the idea that they can work together, that the one influences or gives way to the other in proper form. But this or implies that the title, that the book has two titles, but that we're actually maybe perhaps talking about two different characters. That Victor is the Frankenstein And Adam, as you guys, I like that you guys call him that, is the modern Prometheus. How are we feeling about that? Paul, you had another point. What are you thinking, man?
I think first where I'm going with this is I'm going to repent of calling Victor a coward. However, I think with that, once you absolve him of being a coward, you have to convict him of being a narcissist.
Guilty.
Absolutely. And so with that point, though, I think you have to acknowledge that Victor does a lot of evil after he creates the monster, but also I think after he creates the monster, the one place he grows is by not creating the second monster.
Ooh, we're bringing the bride in.
Yes, and because he shows that one bit of growth in going, like I made this point in my journal, it's the Jurassic Park question. We were so caught up in wondering if we forgot to ask if we should. He finally asks if he should, which is one place of growth, but we also forget that the evil he does directly to the monster with intention is after the monster in detail relays Victor's brother being murdered.
Yeah.
So does he still do evil? Is he still a narcissist? Is he still the antagonist of the story? Yes. But we have to remember that he is the antagonist in transitioning from the narcissistic evil to the evil of lashing out. Okay. Because his innocent brother has been murdered, and so he's guilty of both evils.
Okay, good. I like how you're introducing different kinds of evil, but I would contest that his motivation in killing the bride is for humanity. I mean, he says it so often on the boat. He's like, "I saved the human race, bro. I did it. I didn't make the monster." But that's not quite what we get here. Right. Well, here's what actually makes him dismember the bride, right? Even if I were to leave Europe and inhabit the deserts of the New World, yet one of the first results of these sympathies for which the demon thirsted would be children. And you guys were asking, like, could he not make the bride infertile? And apparently not. And the race of devils would be propagated upon the earth. I don't know, man. Like, they're pretty dang rational creatures. If they're demonic, it's demonic in a way that humans are demonic, who might make the very existence of the species of man a condition precarious and full of terror. I had right for my own benefit to inflict this curse upon every generation. So there you go. That's the utilitarian effort. Like, I'm going to do the right thing, you know? I had before been moved by the sophism of the being I had created, right? He's saying that the being who I created is wily and smart. He's like Satan from Genesis or from Paradise Lost. He's really good with his words, right? And this also happens elsewhere where he says that, but as if possessed of magic powers, the monster had blinded me to his real intentions. And when I had thought that I had prepared only my own death, I hastened that of a far dearer victim. He's talking about Elizabeth here. But he thinks that the monster is bending his mind, right? And so he's working here. You know, he's thinking about the causes, you know, that are, you know, the outcome of making the bride. I trembled and my heart failed within me because he sees him at the casement. When I'm looking up, I saw the light of the moon and the demon at the casement, and a ghastly grin wrinkled his lips as he gazed on me. Where I sat fulfilling the task which he had allotted to me. Yes, he had followed me in my travels. He had loitered in forests, hid himself in caves, and taken refuge in wide and desert heaths. And he now came to mark my progress and claim the fulfillment of my promise. As I looked on him, his countenance expressed the utmost extent of malice and treachery, right? What's the face of the monster doing? What's the expression, Cameron? It's smiling, right? And in this smile, Victor sees malice and treachery. I would go so far as to say that this is a projection. right? The monster is smiling. Why? Cameron. He has hope. He's not going to be alone forever. I thought with a sensation of madness on my promise of creating another like to him and trembling with passion. Oh, there you go. Right? When you tremble with passion, you do bad things. Trembling with passion, he tore to pieces the thing on which I was engaged. The wretch saw me destroy the creature on whose future existence he depended for happiness, and with a howl of devilish despair and revenge withdrew. So Victor is considering the fate of the human race as he makes the bride, but that's not what causes him to destroy her. What causes him to destroy the bride? Venus. He sees the monster smile, and that is too much of an insult to his own dignity. He cannot allow the monster to be happy, and so he destroys the bride. So yes, Paul, you're right. He is constantly aware that he's doing something that could damage all of mankind, right? But the thing that makes him tear up the monster is noticing a smile, is noticing happiness. And he can't let the monster be happy because the monster has hurt him. And what is so interesting here, what is like so wild is that when the monster decides to kill Elizabeth, it's the same thing. But when I discovered, he says, after the murder of Clerval, I returned to Switzerland, heartbroken, overcome, monster's miserable. And he actually is beginning to pity his creator. He says, I pitied Frankenstein. My pity amounted to horror. He's feeling sorry for this guy. But when I discovered that he, the author at once of my existence and of its unspeakable torments, dared to hope for happiness, that while he accumulated wretchedness and despair upon me, he sought his own enjoyment in feelings and passions, from the indulgence of which I was forever barred, then impotent envy and bitter indignation filled me with an insatiable thirst for vengeance. I recollected my threat and resolved that it should be accomplished. That's a really interesting moment where the monster mirrors Victor. Victor mirrors the monster. Victor kills, destroys the bride of Frankenstein, right? Because he doesn't want the monster to be happy. And then here we have the monster killing Elizabeth because he doesn't want Victor to be happy. Massively miserable stack of events. And I mean the oath right here, that's a really great scene, right? Where he says, I will be with you on your wedding night. How does Victor interpret that? Oh my God. Did you think that? Were you at all thinking that the monster was coming to kill Victor?
My copy of the book had a reading guide that said, introduced characters, and Elizabeth's character said married to Victor.
Murdered. That's horrible. Oh no. Yeah, that kind of ruined it. But I just think it's like so. It sounds fitting that he would repay him back in kind and kill his bride too. I mean, it just seems like the dumbest, most narcissistic thing in the world to imagine that the monster's talking about him. Very much in Victor's character, though.
I mean, at this point, I thought it was very obvious that he was going to kill Victor's intended bride.
Yeah, same. I mean, when I read it, I was like, obvious.
They're at a tit for tat of causing each other mutual pain. They don't. So we've kind of deviated from the principle of if somebody does something wrong, you punish the person who did wrong. At this point in the novel, it's like I'm punishing you to take away the thing that you love most. So it's if you hurt me by killing something I love, I hurt you by killing someone that you love.
Right.
It's our fair game at this point.
Yeah, I mean, so many innocents are dying. I'm even thinking about the poor dogs, right, who are killed as they chase each other across the tundra, and the poor people whose food is taken as the monster comes in and cleans out their larders. Paul.
Romanticism though, because she's showing that yes, the truest evil is to be cruel to each other, but there's also nuance in that cruelty and that they can both be the villain. And the whole thing about romanticism is that malice is the ultimate evil.
Yeah, the malice that you feel instinctively, right? You know, the shooting of the albatross, that just part of you that I want to kill, I want to hurt, I want to buy, right? And you're like, yeah, I just want to destroy. You know, knee-jerk reaction cruelty being the absolute worst. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Yeah, this is an expansion of the cruelty of the mariner, right? You know, the mariner kills the albatross, the entire crew dies. Chops up the body of the bride on the table, and a village of Sami indigenous people starves over the winter because the monster came and cleaned out their larder, or a dog dies in the in the tundra, right? So it's not just like, oh, one thing, one point of misery. It's a snowball of misery. But that's what Victor is saying. If people had just sought to their domestic affections, Greece would not have been conquered. The Aztecs would not have been destroyed.
Yeah, sort of. I thought a big part of this was like
Yeah, stacks.
So I don't know. In my journal, I want to compare this to kind of like to another book that I really like, that was big on revenge.
Yeah, which is not terribly ambivalent on the subject, right?
In that book, the nature of revenge is kind of like, it's seen almost as justified, and you want it to happen. It's understandable why. But the difference here is that, I mean, at the end, you see Frankenstein express remorse for the things that he's done.
Kind of, yeah.
Also expresses remorse for the unintended consequences of it. How long is that? Victor was specifically targeting innocent people, whereas the Count, innocent people got hurt because of what he did.
The monster targeted innocent people, and then innocent people are hurt because of what Victor is doing. Yeah, I like that.
I think intent is a big part of it.
Intent is a big part of it. I don't think Victor is intending a lot of what's happening, but the monster is pretty intent. Paul brings up an interesting case, which we haven't done a whole lot of in this class, but relating the novel back to Romanticism. And I think in so many ways it is a romantic text, even though it repudiates sublimity as something good or something holistic, something you should do for your health, right? One of the ways it repudiates Romanticism is it makes Victor out to be massively irrational. He's a smart guy, but he's not terribly observant of reality. He doesn't seem to understand the truth, right? While he's chasing the monster, right, he finds food left out for him to keep him alive. But as he goes, he says, the fare was indeed coarse, such as the peasants of the country ate, but I will not doubt that it was set there by the spirits that I had invoked to aid me. Who are these spirits? Huh? Well, yeah, I mean, later on we have him actually killing a rabbit and said, eat this hare and prepare yourself because you're about to chase me into the Arctic. Right? It is Adam, but he's saying it's not Adam. Who are these spirits? He does call upon the Furies, but he also calls upon the shades of his dead friends. He goes to the cemetery before he begins chasing the monster in deep grief, and he kneels upon the grass, kisses the earth with quivering lips, and exclaims, by the sacred earth on which I kneel, by the shades that wander near me, by the deep and eternal grief that I feel, I swear, and by thee, O night, and the spirits that preside over thee, to pursue the demon who caused this misery. And so when he gets to the food that's been left out for him, he indulges in what is something that is called the horn principle. Have you ever heard of the halo principle? It's a critique on rationality. It's where anything good that happens to you is necessarily good as at the whole and is the product of something you like and not something you hate. Now, the horn principle is the exact opposite. Thanks, Obama. Right? Where a bad thing happens to you, it's because of someone you don't like. It's because the world is stacked against you. Your enemies are the reason why it's happening. And it's often a sign of paranoia. I stubbed my toe against the wall. I did so because whatever political party you don't like, right? And this is just a way that our rational minds short circuit causality. He's stubbing his toe here, and he's saying it's all the monster's fault. He finds food. He cannot credit the food to the monster because he's not prepared for that level of nuance here. And also, he not only does spirits and ghosts, but he still believes in the power of rhetoric, which is actually not the most romantic thing in the world. I love the bit where the Walton's crew that they should keep sailing into the Arctic, which is kind of contradictory, isn't it? He's just been telling them that they should cut it out. And he's like, what do you mean? What do you demand of your captain? Are you then so easily turned from your design? Yes, you should be. You should go home. It's not worth dying. Did you not call this a glorious expedition? And wherefore was it glorious? Not because the way was smooth and placid as a southern sea. And it's like, wow, it's kind of Henry V, right? You know, standing up there, giving a speech and stirring everybody. But because it was full of dangers and terror, we choose to go to the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is hard, right? It's the same thing, right? Because at every new incident, your fortitude was to be called forth and your courage exhibited because danger and death surrounded. Wow, very masculine. Hoo ha. Let's go. And these you were to brave and overcome. For this was it a glorious, for this was it an honorable undertaking. You were hereafter to be hailed as the benefactors of your species, right? You'll be worshipped as gods. Your names adored as belonging to brave men who encountered death for honor and the benefit of mankind. And now, behold, with the first imagination of danger, if you will, the first mighty and terrific trial of your courage, you shrink away. And then I love how he's rising out here. Oh, be men. He's making it masculinist. He's making it about having a penis. Oh, be men. Or be more than men, transcend, become gods. Be steady to your purpose and firm as a rock. This ice is not made of such stuff as your hearts may be. It's kind of good, by the way. This is sort of, wow, I'm feeling it. Great halftime speech. You had something quick to say, Cameron? Yes. Yeah, and you know, he's really giving him the pep talk to end all pep talks. Return as heroes who have fought and conquered and who know not what it is to turn their backs on the foe. Cool. What do they do immediately after the speech? They turn around, right? And that is like that, you know how I told you, like, there are things about Sense and Sensibility that you pick up as hilarious, like your second or third time through. This is so funny to me that they're like, nice, cool. And they turn around, right? Because rhetoric is rhetoric. Words are words. It's not food. It's not warmth. It's not a family who cares about you. Mary Shelley's making an interesting statement here that there's only so much that words and ideas can do. In the end, you're back down to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And that becomes the most important thing about being human. And I just think it's a really great way to end this, is that it's actually a really realistic novel. Even though it has humans being sewn together from charnel pits, it accurately understands the value of intellect, the value of words, the value of poetry. It's kind of crapping on poetry, right? You know, it's like Victor doesn't actually convince them of anything, which is something that you're going to find taken up and challenged in the work of our next author, who just so happens to be her husband, Percy Bysshe Shelley, who thinks poetry and words are awesome, that they can do anything and everything. And I'm interested in what you think of that. How much time do I have left? Not a whole lot. I think I have 4 minutes left. You guys, we're bringing up movie versions of the monster, and I really like the Kenneth Branagh 1994 Frankenstein because he uses electric eels and not lightning to animate Robert De Niro. It's great. Look it up. Points for originality. But my favorite version of the monster actually appears in a TV show called Penny Dreadful. You guys hear about that? He's played by Rory Kinnear, and he is quite a lover of poetry, and he quotes Wordsworth, which is a lot of fun because Wordsworth being one of the surprise fans of the book. But just to get you to maybe see this,
explosive way of entering, I guess, a TV
I'll show this
series.
video. Right? Shakespearean actor.
Frankenstein's creature is filled with pain and longing and yearning.
Imagine that I was dead. The creature is painfully shy. Equally, he can be vicious and prone to.
There you go. Thus I remove you from thy. Thus I remove me from thy sight. Right? He covers his hand, covers his eyes.
Violence. I will strike down all those you love. It's literally pieced together. He's trying to unpiece who those different elements of him are.
Me, demon. So now I have a name.
When it came to casting the creature, there was never a discussion of any other actor. It was only ever Rory. He has a face which is very driven and tough, but has a vulnerability there, which is, I think, very poignant for the creature.
Rise and walk with me.
So right though. That's like what I imagined, right? Kind of like, I don't know. I don't mean to be mean to Rory Kinnear, but he's not conventionally attractive, right? But the long black hair, the pale skin, the elevated discourse.
America doesn't know the way we in Britain do.
It's really good.
And he could bring such.
Yeah, watch some Frankenstein movies. Tell me what you think. Do you like Boris Karloff? Do you like Rory Kinnear? Do you like Robert De Niro? That would be a fun journal for the upcoming week. It's watch Gene Wilder's Young Frankenstein and tell me how you feel cinema handles Mary Shelley's legacy. All right, I'm out of time. You guys can head on out. An accidental critique of Coleridge. Interesting.